Welcome to Shielded, the podcast dedicated to helping Florida's first responders understand the laws that affect their work and their lives. We bring clear answers, practical tips, and stories to help you when you need it most. If you're a first responder in Florida, this is your playbook. Be sure to check out all of our resources at bicklerlaw.com. I'm your host, Paolo Longo, and I'm here with my partner, Jeff Bickler. At Bickler & Longo, this is what we do. Now let's get into it. Welcome back, everyone, to this next episode of Shielded, the podcast for first responders. With me again is my partner, Kristine Callegy. Hey, Kristine, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So we're going to call this, I guess, part 2 of our mailbag series. These are questions that listeners have been emailing in, calling us about, DMing. I'm cool now because we get DMs. I feel like, I'm important now. And so we did one episode of a lot of questions that we get. We had so many and we're continuing to get more. So we thought, well, let's do one more episode on trying to answer your questions. These are from actual clients and actual listeners and things that we talk about basically every day. So with that being said, Kristine, let's get right into it. So we've got a corrections officer up in the Panhandle who asks, and we get this all the time, right? Can workers' comp make me go back to work before I'm ready, before I think I'm ready?
Well, the short answer is physically no. They cannot pick you up and drag you and take you to work, right? But what they can do is convince your doctor to put you back to work before you're actually ready. And in that scenario, it muddies the waters a little bit. So we have to come in and figure out, are you actually ready? Are there physical limitations that your injury still has on you and your ability to do your job that we can then use to go back to the doctor and say, hey, we need to reevaluate this, put him on light duty, put him on restricted duty, or him or her, depending on what we're looking at. And then try to kind of reel it back in that way. That's the easiest way to do it. But having someone who knows how to navigate that system and how to get those answers and make those phone calls is really important in that scenario, especially where you've got someone breathing down your neck to come into shift.
Right. So, but there are consequences, right? I mean, no, you don't have to go to work, right? I mean, you never have to go to work, but if I don't think I'm ready to go back and my doctor thinks I am and I decide not to go back, there are some potential consequences, right? Including, I'm not going to get paid, workers' comp may not pay me, things like that, right?
Hey,
so it's important to...
all of those things are definite consequences for sure.
Right.
And the other side of the coin is you go and you show them that you can't do it and they send you home.
Right. You go in and you do it for 10 minutes and when they see you can't do it, they send you home. Right. Or you have, or God forbid you have another accident. Well, I told you I wasn't ready. And now you have 2 claims, right?
Yep. So, and it makes your injury worse too. We've seen that happen. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen that happen.
Right. Especially with a lot of the orthopedic injuries, right? Some folks aren't, maybe they do light duty and then they go back gradually. A lot of these problems come up when it's just go from no work back to full duty, okay. But, it doesn't always work out great.
Right.
But that's a good question.
Yeah, get that all the time.
This one we get to, and this is more of a firefighter question. Okay. Well, I love my firemen, but this is the question we get from them. What if I don't want to do the light duty that I'm offered? If I'm put on restricted duty or if I'm put on light duty and I don't want to do it, what happens then?
You're right. That is mostly a firefighter question because they never want to go in and do the 5-day-a-week, 40-hour work week like all of us pencil pushers do in an office. And I don't blame them. They're used to their routine and their 24-hour shifts. But in that scenario, if you're on light duty and they have light duty available for you to work and you just decide, hey, I don't want to make the 30-mile drive every single day that week, I'm going to use my leave time instead. Workers' comp isn't responsible for paying you if you refuse to do the light duty. We call that voluntary limitation of income.
Yeah. And I mean, really, we do get this a lot with the firemen because of their schedules. They're used to having, 1 day on, 2 days off, 1 day on. And, they do that for a career. They're not used to working 9 to 5, especially sitting in an office and, counting rolls of paper towels and whatever else they have them do.
Yeah.
I had this come up pretty recently where I had a guy over on the West Coast and he worked here in Central Florida. I mean, it was a 2-hour drive, but he only did it, twice a week, every third day. It was fine. But then when they put him on light duty, he had to do it every single day. And that gets burdensome. And so the answer is, look, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. But the consequence is workers' comp isn't going to pay you. You may not be getting paid. You may have to burn your own sick time, your own vacation time. The statute is not very friendly on these, issues. There are some potential disciplinary issues, that could come up. And so, it's a very delicate tightrope that you have to watch, but it happens more frequently than you think. Next question, and unfortunately we get this one a lot too. What happens if my employer fires me, right, or separates me while I'm out on no duty?
Well, in that scenario, we would get the union involved as well, because likely that action is a breach of the CBA or whatever sort of agreement that they have with the union to keep these people employed or to follow certain protocols in order to terminate somebody. 3 strikes, you're out, sort of thing. It also opens the door to a potential civil lawsuit. We call those 44205 claims, where an employer is taking a negative action against somebody because they have a workers' comp claim.
Right.
You can get damages that way. It's a very tricky situation to navigate, and normally we get the union involved, like I said, and employment lawyers as well, because it could be a wrongful termination situation on top of a 44205 and a union issue.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we get this. I get this question a lot, but it doesn't happen very much. At least with the folks that I've represented. I mean, they are worried about it, and it is a legitimate concern. But I think fortunately, it's not a regular occurrence. I mean, I think most agencies, most employers know that they can't separate somebody or terminate somebody while they're, home on no work from a work-related accident, right? But it's a common question. But yeah, we definitely would get your union involved to help. I mean, there's grievance procedures and things like that pursuant to collective bargaining agreements. There are several, other statutory provisions that are going to help protect you in that situation. And honestly, we don't see it very much, but every once in a while it will come up, right? Where you'll see, well, you haven't been back at work in 6 weeks, you're fired. Whoa. But it is not a regular occurrence. It is a regular question, but it's not a regular occurrence. But still, it's important.
Yeah, more so what I see on that side of things is someone who's been out for an extended period of time, right? They've got a really bad back injury, or they've had coronary bypass surgery and they've been out for, a year plus. And the agency is asking, okay, what is your medical status? Are you coming back? What are you doing? And they have a policy in place that says, you can only be out X amount of time for a work injury and then X amount of time for a non-work injury. And so you're kind of running up against that deadline of, hey, I'm not able to be out any longer than this per my employer's policy. And the answer is the same there. You get the union involved, you get the employment lawyers involved, and look at, okay, is what they're doing okay per their policies? And do we need to look at, some sort of other avenue for legal action?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, that brings up, sort of a side question, right? Which is, what happens if I run out of time that I'm allotted, right? Because a lot of agencies give you, 6 weeks, 18 weeks, 9 months, a year, right? And then, if you're off work for a year and, you're not coming back to work, there's still a balance where employers, need to have, they have so many positions that they have to fill with people that can do the job, right? And so no employer is going to be required to keep somebody on a no work status or a light duty status indefinitely, right? There's no permanent, probably light duty, and they can't pay you forever if you can't work, right? So that opens up the door to potentially a line of duty disability pension, whether you're with a municipal pension or through FRS in the state, but a lot of times they're not just going to send you a text and say you're fired, right? They're going to say, okay, hey, look, you've got, 30 days left or 60 days left. If you're not going to be able to come back to work, then we need to fill this spot, right? If
Mhm.
it is important to, have those conversations early, right? And plan with the doctors and things like that, right? But the good thing is, I guess we can tell folks is that the medical doesn't change whether you're working or not, right? The medical doesn't change. You're always going to get medical care. So speaking of going back to work, this is a pretty daily question, right? What does MMI mean? What is MMI?
Oh, that's a question I literally got asked earlier this morning from from one of my clients. I know you did too. We get this daily. MMI means a lot of abbreviations in workers' comp if people haven't picked up on that already. So MMI stands for maximum medical improvement. And really what it means is you're kind of the best that you're going to get. It doesn't mean that you're cured or your injury, never happened. It just means you kind of hit a plateau in your recovery, right? Your blood pressure medications are working, blood pressure is stabilized. You've recovered from your bypass surgery or your back surgery, whatever it may be, gone through your therapy, kind of let your medications do their thing, get you to a good spot, and that the doctors don't think that you're going to improve anymore. That's really what the long-winded definition of maximum medical improvement is. But that doesn't mean that your case is over. It just means that you've recovered as much as you possibly can from that particular injury or illness, depending on what it is.
Right, right. And that kind of begs the question, once my doctor says I'm as good as I'm gonna get, once I'm at MMI, right? How is that number calculated and is my case over? Does that mean my case is over? Right? 'Cause
No,
I get that.
no.
I get that all the time.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
doctor released me. He said I was MMI and he said, he's going to close my case,
Mhm.
right? That's that not
Yeah. Yeah. The orthopedic doctors tend to be the ones to tell the clients that, the patients that, when they're, hey, I'm putting you at MMI, I'm giving you a 1% impairment rating or whatever it may be, we're going to close your file out, see you never, basically. And these doctors don't understand that you still have the right to go in and get whatever treatment you need, whether it's injections or pain management, additional PT. It doesn't mean that your case is closed. And the impairment rating that the doctors assign is really intended to kind of compensate you like pain and suffering, right? The higher your percentage, the more weeks of impairment benefits you receive. You know, hey, so and so, sorry you hurt your knee on duty, or sorry you got this crazy heart attack. Here's some money to make up for it. It never does, but that's the idea behind MMI and behind the impairment ratings is
right. And it certainly doesn't mean your case is over or you
no,
settled your case or
no.
if you accept the money. And MMI doesn't mean, we get this pretty regularly too. My doctor said I got a 5% impairment rating. So does that mean I'm 5% disabled? Like, no, the numerical rating doesn't translate into your ability to work,
Mhm.
right? Or what level of disability that you have. Right? We've got guys with 50% impairment ratings, they work full duty.
Yeah,
And we've got guys with 5% impairment ratings and they're permanently disabled.
right.
The numerical percentage that you get just translates into how many weeks of benefits you get, right? The higher the number percentage, the more weeks of checks you get. It's like based on this on our favorite old book, right?
The
The
1996
Dinosaur,
guide.
1996. It's an actual like a real book.
Yeah.
And so the doctors, every body part, every page in this book has a body part, and they go down to the right page in the right line, and whatever the injury is, that's the numerical rating that the doctors assign, right? And then we get that number and we make sure that you're paid those benefits correctly. But it doesn't mean that your case is over. It doesn't mean that you don't get any more care, and it doesn't mean that you were disabled, right? It just translates into how many weeks of checks and how much money, what kind of a tax-free benefit in the amount of checks you're going to get.
Hmm.
But we do get that a lot.
I
Uh,
always tell people the monetary benefit portion for the majority of people is a temporary thing, but the medical care is forever.
right, right. And just because you're at MMI doesn't mean that you don't get any more care. You can go to the doctor, as long as you need care, as long as you're hurting. The heart cases are a little bit different, right? Because you're always going to be taking medicine and you're always going to be following up. The knee surgeries, the neck surgeries, the back surgeries, the rotator cuffs, those kind of things, the orthopedic stuff. The doctor says, okay, this is as good as you're going to get, and as long as we don't need to cut or screw or drill, they kind of throw you back into the pack.
Yeah.
But your case isn't over, right? If you get a flare up, if you get something going on, and you need to get back in, whether it's more medication or physical therapy, your case still stays open, right? I mean, you are subject to the statute of limitations, and you need to make sure that you're going to the doctor at least once a year to keep your case open. But that makes me crazy when I hear my clients tell me, "Oh, the doc said, you know, I'm at MMI and he's closing my case." I'm like, "Then, doctor, they don't close your case. Well, you
Yeah.
close your case."
Yeah. It's not up to the doctor.
Right, right, right. And if the doctor won't see you after MMI, then they got to give you a new doctor, right? I mean, you're always entitled to care, right? So that's an important thing. We could probably do a whole episode just on that.
We probably could.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. How crazy does doctors make me? That how crazy that'll be the title of the
The
episode.
limit does not exist.
Yeah, yeah. It's insane. Here's another good one. This is from a South Florida law enforcement officer. What happens to my case when, I either retire or I leave my agency?
That's a great question. We get that all of the time because it happens all the time. And the short answer is really nothing. As long as you're still treating, like you just said, with your doctor at least once a year, the fact that you're no longer with that agency and you may even retire and get a different job with a different agency somewhere else or a different part of Florida, that does not matter. Workers' comp is still obligated to provide you care. And if you do end up relocating, whether within Florida or a different part of the country, you just have to let us know, hey, this is my new address. I'm going to be up there in 6 weeks. And the adjuster still has to find a doctor to treat you, whether it's an orthopedic doctor, a neurologist, cardiologist, electrophysiologist, whatever the specialty is, they're still obligated to care for you. The claim being open isn't tied to your employment with that agency.
Right, right. Yeah, my favorite line, and I tell every client this every time, said, "It doesn't matter if you move to Colorado and open an alpaca farm, your case is open. We'll get you a doctor." Because I actually had many, many years ago a client that retired and he moved to Colorado and he opened an alpaca farm,
Hmm.
right? Which is, crazy for a retired law enforcement officer to do, but hey, he's happy, he's living his best life.
Yeah.
And, we got him a doctor out there and he treats, right? I mean, he treats out there. So, like Christine said, your case isn't dependent on your employment.
Hmm.
You know, if you retire, we get you a new doctor wherever you go.
Yeah.
If you change agencies, right, which happens, I got a lot of guys who, they may do 20 years for municipal and then they'll go to work for the state and then get an FRS pension. And if that's what you want to do, then you can do that. Your case stays open, you get medical care and, nothing happens. Or you could sit home and play golf all day and your case still stays open.
Right.
So, you know, your employment doesn't affect your ability to get continued medical care.
Right.
And that is a question that we get a lot, a lot, a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sort of tied to that is the next one, which is what if my injury prevents me from being able to ever return to full duty? Meaning I've got some kind of permanent restrictions and I can't, get back out on the road or I can't ride the back of a truck anymore
Mhm.
in my fire station and I can't do the job permanently
Well,
forever.
yeah, this is something that you kind of touched on early in our discussion about disability pension. So depending on where you are and what sort of pension plan your agency has, whether it's municipal or through the FRS, the Florida retirement system, you got to look at what are my requirements. With FRS, you need two doctors to say you can't do that job on a permanent basis. And municipal is a little bit different. Some agencies, pension plans require one doctor, some require two, some will require three. It's just really dependent on what that plan says. But it's something that can be done. It's life altering, it's career ending. Of course, it's probably not what people plan to do, but just because something prevents you from returning doesn't mean that your life is over, right? You have options. We can walk you through those steps. We can help you get through that process and make sure that, you're not left on the street homeless because you're not having an income because of it.
Right, and if they can't accommodate you, you're gonna get workers' comp, right? You have the right to get paid. Well, if they're not gonna accommodate you and your restrictions,
Right.
comp is gonna pay you. Your medical care is gonna remain open, right? So you're still gonna get, doctors and therapy and medicine and, whatever else kind of treatment that you need. But, it is a tough question because sometimes, asking that question, all right, do I really need to look at line of duty pension right now? That's typically a hard question to ask, especially when you're, assuming and you're operating under the assumption that you're gonna get back to work, right? But, sometimes, that doesn't work out, at least the way that you think. Now, we do have people that, maybe transition into a civilian position because they want to keep their job and they want to stay working and it's fine with them. But most folks, if they can't, be in the firehouse the whole time, regular duty or out on the road as a law enforcement officer, then, they're really looking at a line of duty pension, whether it's through your municipal pension or whether it's through the state and FRS.
Yep.
And we're happy to talk to you about those things. But like Christine said, there are definitely options, right? But the first step is, am I really going to be able to go back full duty? And if my doctors are saying, look, this is not going to happen, it's a tough conversation, obviously, but there are options, right? There are definitely options. So that's a good thing. And some good points you brought up.
Hmm.
I guess this is sort of analogous to that, along the same lines. How do I make sure to keep my case open for my future medical care if I'm not working or I don't go back?
Yeah, so even in a scenario where you're not working, whether you had regular retirement or you went the disability route, that answer is really kind of what we had talked about just a few minutes ago, where in order to keep your claim open, you just have to treat with the doctor and keep treating. And like Paul said, if you have a heart case or a hypertension case, normally with your cardiologist on, a 3 or 6 month schedule rotation where you don't ever have to worry about your statute of limitations on you. Because if you miss, if your appointment is on, May 1st, 2024, and your appointment in 2025 is set for May 3rd, that adjuster, she's doing cartwheels down the hallway because she's excited that your statute of limitations has started. You miss it by just that much, that they will close your case. So you have to make sure that you get in there at least once a calendar year. And I always tell my clients, when you're in there for your appointment, make sure that you schedule your next one while you're there and it's within your 1 year window. If they give you a hard time, then you need to get one of us involved. And, there's ways around that. But having yourself set up for success and doing that while you're there it's helpful for you. It's less stressful for everyone involved. And you know that you're never going to miss your deadline and have some sort of letter come in the mail that says, oh, now your claim's denied because you missed your 1 year mark.
Yeah, I hate getting that phone call. I had my appointment scheduled, but then the doctor had to reschedule it because he was out of town. And then when we got to reschedule, then something came up, and then I had to reschedule it. And then now it's 15 months or something like that.
Mhm.
And we've had those conversations over the years. I'm like, well, the statute ran, you didn't get back to the doctor, is going to be a problem. Right now, we've got some recent case law come out that could potentially change that, but
Yep.
historically, the way to keep your case open is to keep going to the doctor, right? I mean, that's the way to do it. I tell my clients, don't wait a year, right? Go 2 or 3 times a year.
Mhm.
Get in there, because every time you go in, that clock gets started all over again, and you're buying yourself a new year.
Even if the doctor is grumpy, right? Some of these ortho doctors, the ones that say, "Oh, I'm closing your case out." When you go back in there, they may give you an attitude or give you a problem and scoff at you. Well, why are you here? What are you doing? I told you I was closing your case out. Even if you get that sort of not very warm welcome when you go in, you need to still go, because getting in there and having that office visit note be triggered and that bill sent to the adjuster is what's going to keep your case open, regardless of what sort
Right.
of attitude the doctor gives you.
Right, and I've had this situation come up a couple times where, my guy will go back, the doctor's like, "I'm not gonna see you. Your case, your MMI, I'm done. There's nothing else I can do for you." Well, then the carrier's gotta provide an alternate person, right?
Right.
So they have to give you care. So they pick him a new doctor, right, who's gonna see him, and then the new doctor finds a bunch of stuff that the first guy missed, and then now it's like having a whole new claim, and they're getting all kinds of extra care and treatment and stuff, figuring out things that were wrong at the beginning, all because that doctor said, "No, I don't wanna see you," you
Right.
know? You know, and that's happened a handful of times over the years where, we get a new doctor and all of a sudden there's all this other stuff, and, like, that's what they get. So you wanna keep your case open, you have to continue to go to the doctor.
Yep.
You gotta get treatment, take your medicine, fill your prescriptions, do all that stuff.
Yeah, and in the scenario like Paolo mentioned, where you had your appointment set and they call you and they push it back, letting us know right away, we can intervene, and there's ways, mechanical ways, legal ways for us to prevent your statute from running while we wait for that appointment to come up and for you to go. So if that's a scenario that you or anybody that have, definitely give us a call, because we can intervene and we can put a stop to that nonsense.
Yep, yep, yep. And so, last one, what happens, and this is kind of a generic one. We do get this question pretty much, but I just thought we'd lump this in because it is pretty common, right? What happens if workers denies something that my doctor says that I need, right? Whether it's therapy, injections, a referral to a different kind of doctor or a specialist or something like that. And Com says, no, 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 you don't need that, right? Or the nurse case manager goes to the doctor's office with you and says, no, 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 you don't need that.
Mhm. Or surgery, that comes up with surgery a lot too. The authorized doctor has recommended some sort of surgery, and workers' comp says, no, we don't feel like paying that. We're going to deny it. And a lot of people have this idea that you can just get a second opinion in workers' comp and easily go to that doctor, get an eval, and have that second opinion. Our law does not have that option, unfortunately. So there's a couple of different things you can do. You can ask for a new doctor, which is not a second opinion. That's the one-time change. That is exactly what it sounds like. You get one request per claim to get a new doctor, and maybe that doctor will have a different opinion, or use the magical buzzwords that we need them to use, like medical necessity and that it's related to the accident. The other option is to get what's called an independent medical evaluator, which is something that we can help with. And that doctor is kind of like our hired gun, right? He's our medical expert, or she. We send all the records, we set up the eval, and that doctor will give an opinion. Yes, this person needs this surgery. Yes, this person needs this injection. Yes, it's related to the accident. And then we have to go into litigation and go before the judge to have all that stuff awarded. And it takes some time, but there are avenues around it. So, there's a denial issued, or someone is saying, hey, we're not going to provide this benefit for you, or this appointment, or this surgery. You definitely should not just accept that with face value. You should definitely reach out to us so that we can review it and make sure that we're doing these things to get that care for you.
Right. And if they specifically deny something that your doctor's requesting, right, we put that case into litigation, right? We'll conference with the doctor. We'll get the doctor's testimony via deposition,
Yep.
and we'll go to the judge. This is what the doctor's recommending. This is the doctor that you guys picked. This is what our client needs. And so, like Kristine said, we will hire experts and and go that route. It's common enough, right? Obviously, because we're busy litigating these cases. So there's plenty of times when carriers, don't want to pay stuff, and we have to get involved. But
Yep.
that's why we're here.
Yep.
That's why we're here. But all these questions have been fantastic. I'm so happy and pleased that folks are listening, folks are watching, they're asking questions. If you have questions, you can write us anytime at info@bicklerlaw.com. Follow us on socials at Bickler Law, and the website, of course, bicklerlaw.com. Please feel free to contact us anytime with any questions. I like doing these episodes. They're a lot of fun. So hopefully we get more questions and we can do some more of these. But it was good. So thank you, Kristine, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And thanks for everybody for listening. Be safe. Thank you. Thanks for listening to Shielded. At Bickler & Longo, this is what we do. We've represented thousands of first responders across the state of Florida. If you need assistance, don't wait. Please reach out. To learn more, head over to bicklerlaw.com or email us at info@bicklerlaw.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Bickler Law. And if you found today's episode to be helpful, please share it with a fellow first responder who might need to hear it. Until next time, stay safe, and thank you for all you do.